The God of creation has a specific identity. There is no mistaking His existence or His handiwork. Follow in His footsteps and appreciate His handiwork as our speaker lights the way.
Welcome to the fourth session of Creation in Symphony. In the last session, we considered day number 4 of creation, the stellar heavens. And I think it would be appropriate that we tie that with day number 5. The point of Creation in Symphony as a model is that the entire creation is interrelated and interdependent upon the Creator Himself. Is the universe a young universe? We have various suggestions that the redshift indicates that the universe is old. The redshift indication is a calculation whereby galaxies or stars receding at a very fast rate deep in space would give off colors that would tend toward the red. However, Dr. Arp has published an entire book. He's a world-class astronomer, and he has published data showing that the redshift has nothing to do with velocities and distance. It has to do with the nature of life, light, and can have to do with the intergalactic particles themselves. Dr. Wolf has found that optically, these data show that light itself has the characteristics of tending toward the red. It has nothing to do with velocity. Therefore, the handle on how old the universe is very shaky. In our opinion, the universe is a part of the original design just a few thousands of years ago. Let me give a bit of substantiating information to indicate that the universe is not nearly as old as it had been previously calculated to be. Dr. Hadley Wood, in Unveiling the Universe, a secular publication, stated, "We know of no process that can maintain a spiral arm for more than 2 galactic revolutions." You know, of course, there are beautiful and gorgeous deep space galaxies that have spiral arms. And he said, we know of no process that can maintain a spiral arm for more than 2 galactic revolutions. Dr. C.B. Clausen, in Exploring the Distant Stars, again a secular publication, wrote, "If this theory is true, the universe is young since it has so many rapidly revolving spirals." Indications and data are mounting that the universe is not nearly as old as we had postulated that it would be. An evolutionist and an astronomer, Jeffrey Burbridge, former director of Kitt Peak National Observatory, relating to the information I just gave to you, stated that evidence of this kind exists. If it is accepted, it means 3 things. Number 1, that at least some quasars do not lie at so-called cosmological distances. Very interesting. Number 2, that at least some parts of the redshift of quasars are due to some effect other than the expansion of the universe. Very interesting. Number 3, that quasars are physically related to bright, comparatively nearby galaxies. And of course, the Creator could have extended the galaxies as far as He wanted, and He created those in cluster bands, systematically orchestrated throughout the universe. In so doing, He had a design and a purpose. Frank Wilson, a secular writer, stated, comparing all of this universe with its fine-tuned increments to 10th to the 55th power of tuning and refinement, very convenient. Frank Wilson wrote that the mind of man can influence the material world at the basic level of quarks and electrons. Now we get into a subject which shows that we as individuals, watching this videotape at the moment, communicating, conversing with each other, have thought processes that actually have to do with the symmetry or the chaos, cooperation or chaos in the universe. We have been designed in the image of the Creator Himself. We've been given a free will to operate, and it appears that we will be held accountable for our influence far beyond that of the immediate relationships that we have. So Frank Wilson wrote, "The mind of man can influence the material world at its basic level of quarks and electrons." Dr. Kevin MacLeod, a creation researcher, reported that French physicist stated that school children, after their experiments had been done, they published that school children, by thought alone, can alter the decay rate of radioactive emission. That is absolutely amazing. It appears that we too are a part of the entire universe at the basic level, and all of this has to be by design. Paul Davies, in Cosmic Blueprint, a secular evolutionary astrophysicist and physicist, wrote, "The impression of design is overwhelming. The universal impression of design is overwhelming." Astronomer George Greenstein wrote, "As we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or capital A in the agency, must be involved," and the capitalization is his choice. "Is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? I suggest that it certainly was." Evolutionist William Stansfield, Ph.D., California Polytechnic Institute, or State University, stated, "It is obvious that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods that they are claimed to be." I'm sure everyone in this audience, whether it be children in school, professors who chair departments, have relied very heavily on radiometric dating to show that the Earth is old. We've been talking about cosmological distances and factors which indicate that the universe may not be nearly as old as we had postulated, and the fact that there is design in the universe, throughout all the universe, and the fact that our minds actually bear a responsibility for some of the basic functioning of that universe at the energy level. That being the case, let's examine some of the internal structure, radioactive materials. This model solves a major problem. We have in the sedimentary deposits of the Earth worldwide radioactive materials. We have been able to calculate the rate at which they decay, and have been able to calculate by some forensic analysis that various individuals were there, that they've been caught as fossils. Forensic analysis can actually assign an age, a recent age, to certain activities, and then geological activities and paleontological activities can assign long ages, but often based on radiometric dating, carbon-14, etc. In the Creation and Symphony model, it solves the whole thing, because the internal structure of the Earth before the cataclysm of the flood held these radioactive elements in perfect balance, a controlled nuclear reactor. At the time of the flood, these were expunged, and they essentially have nothing to do with the age of the Earth. They have to do with the design of the Earth instead. So evolutionist William Stansfield wrote regarding radiometric techniques that it is obvious now that radiometric techniques may not be the absolute dating methods they're claimed to be. Age estimates on a given geological stratum by different radiometric methods are often quite different, sometimes by hundreds of millions of years. Did you get that? We think we have a handle, or that scholars have a handle, and you read in the newspaper that a certain stratum was assigned a particular age, or a fossil, or a bone, or a skeleton assigned a particular age. Well, let's see if it really is that scientific. He stated that different methods often yield different ages, sometime by hundreds of millions of years. There's no absolutely reliable long-term radiological clock. That's a statement by a leader in the field of specialty. Evolutionist Frederick B. Juneman wrote, and I like this quote, "There's been in recent years the horrible realization that radio decay rates are not as constant as previously thought, nor are they immune to environmental influences. And this could mean that the atomic clocks are reset during some global disaster, and events which brought the Mesozoic, age of the dinosaurs, to a close may not be 65 million years old, but rather within the age and memory of man. Class, did you get that statement? A leading evolutionary scholar admits that when you put it all together, it's possible, since various factors reset the clocks, it's possible that the Mesozoic era, which is the era of the dinosaurs, you scholars will recognize it's Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous in period. It closed, according to evolutionary theory, 65 million years ago. But now there's the admission that actually it could have closed within the memory of man. And that is exactly what we are suggesting and stating. All the creation is recent. In the last session, we talked about the plants. Let me tie that in with this session because everything is interrelated. Today we're going to get to the fish and the fowl, and hopefully we'll get further into the series. There is a plant called a voodoo lily. This lily relies on a beetle exclusively for its pollination. You see, all of these days have to be solar days. They have to be recent. The entire creation is systematically orchestrated to function as a single unit. The voodoo lily is pollinated exclusively by a beetle that responds to a particular odor. This plant, when it is ready to pollinate, actually raises its temperature by design as many as 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And in raising its temperature, it releases enzymes with the odor that attract the beetle. He proceeds within the lily, finds himself covered with pollen, proceeds to the next lily, and then the process closes. This means there was orchestrated design in the entire mechanism of interchange of information. Well, what God did on day number 1, 2, 3, and 4 was preparation for day number 5. On day number 5, God created the fish and the fowl. How large were the fish or fishes? I hold the tooth of a shark. This shark was actually almost 100 feet long. There is no way in today's ecology and ecosphere we could grow a shark that large. There are reasons for that. In the pre-flood environment, the fish could get a lot larger. The entire biota was a lot larger. And that shark's tooth illustrates the fact that it was a lot larger. I'd like to emphasize that the fishes are very complicated creatures. Sharks are able to maintain an identification with their entire environment. They're able to pick up electric signals of anything alive or pulsating. They're able to function as responding to a universe of waters. Other fishes have amazing abilities. For instance, the dolphin is able to send out sonar, and he does it by using nasal sacs and the melon. He sends out impulses. They actually reverberate in a cavity of his skull. They're sent forth, and then they're picked up in a small bladder area and through a series of bones that then delicately connect with the middle ear. Very sophisticated sonar, so that he knows exactly where he is at all times. Along with a regular fish, there would of course be snails and other creatures. And here's a little snail that actually has darts. He actually produces a very delta streamlined dart that in today's ecology is toxic. But in the pre-flood world, we highly suspect that it would not be toxic at all, but would be beneficial instead. He actually is able to shoot this out a proboscis, and you'll see in the close-up there are additional darts that are generated. They are loaded. This is a designed structure. There is no way that evolution could produce anything comparable to this. One of my favorite fishes is the Rossi. The Rossi is an amazing creature. He's a small fish, very colorful. He's a cleaner fish. He's illustrated here in this book from Institute for Creation Research. The Rossi's a little cleaner fish. Larger fish have gotten their teeth and jaws dirty by eating other fish as carnivores and by eating plants. So there's a system whereby you have a colony of little Rossi. These fish are very colorful and very animated, and they stay in a primary area. Predator fish actually line up, waiting their turn to have their teeth cleaned, a dental assistant. The last predator fish goes right on by, the new predator fish swims in and waits. These little Rossi fish go in, clean his mouth, back off, and you'd think, well, the fish would say, the predator fish would say, I now have my teeth clean, I'm ready to start eating again. But he doesn't bother the benefactor fish at all. He goes off to another school of fish, and the next predator fish comes in line. Recognizing the necessity for these worldwide, the Creator designed a very novel way for procreation. The Rossi fish have in each little colony the domination of a male. The male fish is very colorful, and the females wait in line in the spawning process for the eggs to be germinated, fertilized, rather, by the fish. And one male dominates that colony. So other males who are less dominant have to go on and seek for their own colony, but the Creator designed a special ability. They can go to search for their colony, or they can change sexes. In a matter of minutes, these less dominant Rossi fish that have wandered up see they're not going to be able to control the colony, so they get in line with the females, and in a matter of minutes they can transfer with the ability to have eggs actually fertilized. But now, in that transfer process, they get near another female and they start using antics. They start going into gyrations. And if they attract the attention of the female next to them, they just go on and start their own colony, and they stop the process of becoming a female. That way we have colonies dispersed throughout the aqueous nature, throughout the water system, with these little Rossis in their parts of the world doing a wonderful job. Creation is a far better explanation for that. I have no idea how an evolutionist would explain all of that fortuitous combination of circumstances and innate characteristics coming about by natural selection, mutational variation, or any system. So, only God can do that. Thus, we have on day number 5, the creation of the fishes. I've just touched a bare introduction to the marvel within the marine life. Now let's go to the birds. I love the birds. The marvel of the birds is absolutely astounding. Actually, we call it the miracle of the birds. Everyone loves a hummingbird. They are designed with beatific colors, designed with a beak that's able to probe into the inner parts of various flowers, and thus they cross-pollinate. Everyone loves, of course, the peacock and the bird of paradise. Birds have a miracle in design. Since they were designed to be avian, they have a very solid skull, but it's honeycombed so it will not be overweighted. And then the wing structure is not only honeycombed, it has struts in the design. It looks like an engineer designed those like you would design the wings of an airplane. Thus, the birds are very light and they're able to function in the atmosphere itself. These little hummingbirds actually use a figure 8 configuration in the flapping of their wings. Therefore, they're able to stabilize themselves, able to back up, go forward, up, down, sideways, in any direction. They are a marvel of design. But let's take that marvel of design a little further. The woodpecker is absolutely amazing. He's an endangered species in many parts of the world. The woodpecker is able to keep borings clean within trees, and we think that characteristic is a recessive genetic characteristic, but his design is absolutely amazing. His tongue is able to extend from 3 to 5 times its normal length because his tongue splits, wraps around his throat, and then wraps around his skull. It comes out his right nostril, again feathers together, unites, and extends for the purpose and design for which he was created. There is no way that design could be explained by, again, mutational variation, fortuitous combination of circumstances. Then the penguin. The penguin looks really awesome in awkwardness on land. But the moment he's in the water, he is able to do spirals and figure eights and octagonal designs with a grace unmatched by anything else in all of creation. He's designed on day number 5 to enjoy the water and, of course, the atmosphere as well. The penguin, again, is a marvel of creation. We have for generations admired the ability of birds to migrate. Now, here we have the blackpoll warbler. And this little creature flies nonstop from New England to South America. And that's the metabolic equivalent of a human sprinting a 4-minute mile for 80 hours without stopping. Did you get that, class? That's the equivalent of a human being in his metabolic rate, a human being sprinting a 4-minute mile without stopping for 80 hours. That is absolutely amazing. The design of these creatures has to be very profound. And how do they navigate? They navigate by using the stars, by the sun, polarized light, the magnetic field, olfactory design like pine forest that would give a memory to them. They're able to hear and pick up low-frequency sonic vibrations caused by the wind that you and I couldn't hear at all. Again, this is a part of the design. I think one of my very favorite areas is the bee. The bee has the amazing ability to air condition his home. We're assuming that the flying insects were created on day number 5 and the rest of the insects on day number 6. He's able to keep his home at a 95-degree temperature. Some of the worker bees will actually transport water from the outside, splash it on the sides of the hive in order to have it evaporate and cool the hive. Others are able to increase their metabolic rate and cluster in cold times to actually keep the temperature again inside the hive at 95 degrees. They use beeswax with absolute economy. They have a dance, and this dance is amazing. They use a configuration whereby they give the direction, they give the amount, they give the olfactory response and the satisfaction of the nectar or source. They give the distance so that any of the other bees can immediately go to the source of food. That communication has to be designed. But let me show you how they're also designed again with the rest of creation. On day number 3, we had the plants created. On day number 4, the stellar heavens. On day number 5, the fish and the fowl and the winged insects as well. All of it is interrelated. There is a lily that is pollinated in a very special way. The lily has a platform that looks identical to a female bumblebee. Now, the male bumblebee hatches before the female. He proceeds, and at exactly the same time of season, it's the pollination time for this bee lily. And the pollen are ready. The platform is ready. The platform in color, texture, and scent is identical to a female bumblebee. So the male bumblebee proceeds to mate, but he doesn't have any luck. In the meantime, he rubs pollen all over his face and proceeds for the next 2 or 3 hours to other bee orchids, in turn cross-pollinating them. Within a few hours, the female bumblebee has been hatched, and he sees he made a mistake, and he proceeds to be with her instead of with the orchid. In the meantime, the orchid has been pollinated, a miracle of God's special design. But I think my favorite of all is the songbird. The songbird produces his song not to attract a mate. A chirp will suffice for that. Not to identify himself with his species and variety. Other signals can do that. Birds have very sophisticated communication. But he produces the song just for the benefit of man. It takes a very complicated process. For instance, he has a relatively small set of lungs, but attached to those lungs he has large air sacs, and he has bronchial tubes, and these bronchi have valves. Here we have the lungs, the air sacs, the valve in the bronchi. Here we have the clavicular sac, which actually compresses around the membranes in the voice box. So as he compresses around the membranes in the voice box, as he inhales the air sufficient, he closes a valve in one of the bronchi tubes. He tenses the membrane, all of this simultaneously, and utters a note. Some birds, like the thrushes, can actually utter simultaneous notes that harmonize with each other. In addition to that, a songbird like the mockingbird is able to mimic sounds that he has just heard or sounds from other birds in their song. It's an amazingly delightful experience to hear the song and then to realize what's going on inside his designed body. There's a bird in Australia that's able to imitate any conceivable sound. He can imitate to some degree a human voice, the horn of a car, the whistle of a train, and any other bird in the forest. The melody by design of the songbird is a marvel of creation. So we have covered in this session the fish and the fowl of day number 5. Now let's proceed to day number 6. On day number 6 we have the creation of the dinosaurs, the land reptiles. The marine reptiles had been created on day number 5. Then we have the creation of the mammals, the rest of the insects, and finally, man. How large were those mammals? Throughout this series of lectures, I've been parading by this replica. This is a certified replica. The original is on display at West Texas State University in Canyon, Texas, excavated near Amarillo, Texas. This is an amazing specimen. What I'm holding is the fossil horns and skull of a bison, a buffalo, Bisoni latifrons. This bison, whose today's counterpart stands about 5 feet in stature, this bison, however, stood 10 feet at the shoulders. In addition to that, the horns extended on out beyond the slight area that's missing, covered a full 8-foot arc. This is the largest buffalo or bison ever found in all history, found in the sedimentary deposits. What this indicates is, in the past, mammals were larger. Camel remains have been found 19 feet tall. Beaver remains have been found 12 feet tall. It's absolutely astounding to realize that everything was larger in the past. Dragonflies, that today have something like a 4-inch wingspan, in the fossil record had a 30 to 40-inch wingspan. Here is a 36-inch wingspan on a fossilized dragonfly. Actually, one was found in Italy with a 60-inch wingspan, a 5-foot wingspan to a dragonfly. Now, the evolutionary model has difficulty in explaining the existence of those creatures in such large forms. If we're supposed to be getting better, more viable, how was it that in the past things were larger than they are today? The evolutionary model has difficulty explaining that. However, the creation model has no difficulty at all. In the creation model, remember, we had the firmamental canopy above the earth filtering out the ultraviolet radiation. That ultraviolet radiation often diminishes the size of the embryo of mice in laboratory experiments. That would indicate that this influx of ultraviolet radiation is damaging us in so many areas. So when we did not have it, when the firmamental canopy filtered that out, then we certainly had the full embryological and genetic expression in its optimal form. Then when we add the atmospheric pressure, we solve a great problem. You see, I dig dinosaurs. I mean, literally dig dinosaurs. I have the privilege of being the discoverer and the director of the excavation of the largest and most complete Acrocanthosaurus ever found. Acrocanthosaurus looked a lot like Tyrannosaurus rex, except that he had spikes on the back of his neck and down through his shoulders and hip and all the way to near the bottom of his tail. The one that we found and excavated at Glenrose stood approximately 20 feet tall and 40 feet long. Dinosaurs are very intriguing creatures. They were created on day number 6 of the creation. I have with me a very special fossil egg. The inset at the bottom of the screen will show details. A major hospital facility recently CAT scanned and x-rayed this egg for us. And it was so astounding that it's not even called an egg now, it's called a hatchling. And you will see some of that x-ray at the inset at the bottom of your screen. I want you to notice first the egg portions of the shell still intact. But notice under the cracked shell are body formations. Notice the skull, and that will show in the x-rays as well at the bottom of the screen. Notice the eye sockets and the little snout. If you can pull the camera in very closely, you'll see a nice little mouth registered. And then notice the neck, the shoulders, the hip structure. Now remember, this is an egg that's hatching. It's not an embryo. This is a little dinosaur coming out of an egg, so he's fully developed. The beautiful symmetrical hip structure, the area where the tail is formed and tucks, and then the tail is completely formed, and you'll see him wiggling that tail, working that tail out when he got caught in a tremendous catastrophe. Portions of the egg are still stuck to his tail. The tail fully developed, forms around, and tucks gently under his neck. This is most unusual. What they found as they x-rayed and CAT scanned this very unique and valuable specimen of a dinosaur egg or hatchling, what they found were various cavities. He was already breathing. The fluid had been expelled, and he was now breathing air and filling his lungs. This is rare indeed. Dinosaurs are an amazing part of the creation. But the evolutionary model has a problem relating to the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs have been used in the evolutionary model for decades to illustrate brute, distant, evolving life forms. They've illustrated the theory of evolution. We have one of my favorites illustrated here, and that's Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus means bone-headed lizard. But Buddy Davis, one of our consultants who does work comparable to the Smithsonian, showed him in a profile that was delightful rather than brutish. But the dinosaurs had a problem in the evolutionary model. Let's see if I can clarify the problem and then address it and give an answer. Paleontologists were very hesitant to admit that the dinosaurs they excavated had very small rib cages, indicating small lungs. When we were excavating the Acrocanthosaurus near Glenrose, when I got into the rib cage, I was astounded. The ribs were only about 22 inches long. Very short, complete but very short, indicating a small lung capacity. How is it that a creature 20 feet tall, 40 feet long, supposedly a carnivore, could get enough oxygen to breathe in our atmosphere today? Well, the academic community of evolutionists finally said, we've solved the problem. Dr. Landis, U.S. Geological Survey, and others found air bubbles trapped in amber in the Cretaceous layering. Cretaceous, of course, means dinosaur remains are there. Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, all of the Mesozoic era indicate that dinosaur remains are there. We do not agree with the time scale of the evolutionary hypothesis, but we do agree that dinosaurs were there. Our position is they were created at the same time man was created. In fact, in the book of Job, chapter 40, verses 15 through 24, the biblical record states, "Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee, he eateth grass as an ox." The Creator goes on to describe Behemoth as having a tail like an entire cedar tree, and as being the chief of the ways of God. What creature is the chief of the ways of God? I would suggest that it's the dinosaur. Seismosaurus is the largest dinosaur found to date, and he could raise his head 70 feet in the air. From snout to tail was 140 feet long and weighed almost 200,000 pounds. Now, the evolutionary model has a difficulty. You see, by standard evolutionary geophysics, it is postulated that the Earth expanded from 60% of its current diameter to 100% of its current diameter. And during the Jurassic, just before the Cretaceous, was, according to evolutionary theory, 60% of its current diameter. But what they have not calculated is that if you maintain the same mass and shrink the volume, you invoke the universal law of gravitation, which means that Seismosaurus, that supposedly was a Jurassic dinosaur, Seismosaurus, who weighed almost 200,000 pounds, if living on a 60% diametered Earth, would weigh over 500,000 pounds. That's absolutely impossible. Now, let's get to the other area that's problematic for the evolutionist. How can these big dinosaurs with a bulk weight to oxygenate, that's almost 200,000 pounds, get enough oxygen to feed the deep cell tissue of their bodies when their lungs are rather small? Well, Dr. Landis and others suggested they found the answer, and a number of newspapers and a number of secular scientific journals paraded the information saying that as they crushed these air bubbles of amber, they found 30 to 35% oxygen ratio compared to today's 20 or 21%. But they admitted that the pressure inside those bubbles was 8 to 9 times our current atmospheric pressure. Pressures like that can actually tend to bleed nitrogen ratio and thus conserve oxygen ratio. That being the case, their figures are highly suspect. But let's take it a step further. In our model, we have twice the atmospheric pressure, domination of magenta light, filtration of ultraviolet, 8 times the current carbon dioxide rate, bringing it from 0.026 to approximately 0.25%. But in recent weeks, we've also refined the model with very specific boundaries. It's been found that if you double the atmospheric pressure, you do something special. You're able to oxygenate the whole blood plasma. Back to the dinosaur problem. Secular researchers thought they had solved the problem by giving 30% to 35% oxygen ratio to the dinosaurs. But you have 2 problems there. That only saturates the hemoglobin with oxygen. It takes additional atmospheric pressure to saturate the blood plasma. The creation model, with 2 atmospheres of pressure, 1 above our current ambient atmosphere of pressure, actually solved the problem. But the ratio of oxygen has to remain low, down around 23 to 25%. Otherwise, you introduce volatility to the atmosphere. So the creation model solves the problem from every direction. Dinosaurs were a vital part of the creation. Now we come to a special area of consideration. Man. Man is very unique. In the next lecture, we will study just how unique man really is. But in the closing moments of this lecture, let's talk about fossil men, just for a brief period of time. I have the privilege of having excavated some very fine fossils. For instance, an Indian called Princess Petite, who is at the University of Texas in the Balcones Laboratory. And I have had the privilege of examining various artifacts at various parts of the world, having been in approximately 20 different countries. It is currently stated that the Australopithecines led finally to Cro-Magnon, through Homo habilis, Homo erectus, to Cro-Magnon, and of course to Neanderthal man. But in this ascent of man, there are various areas that have not been covered with academic research. Sir Solly Zuckerman, one of the world's leading physical anatomists, has examined the remains at Olduvai and also other remains of supposed early hominids. And he has stated unequivocally in scientific journals that if man evolved from ape, he didn't leave a single trace of his ascent from ape to man. He has stated that these remains of Homo habilis are actually the remains of an Australopithecine ape. Even Homo erectus could not actually walk erect. Recent studies have indicated, and scientific journals have published, the fact that the inner ear balance was insufficient for him to have walked erect. Man has always been man, has always been man. Mary Leakey published the famous Laetoli tracts that are certainly humanoid and I believe fully human. In fact, they have the great toe, the phalanges trench. They have, as I will point out in our Burdick footprint, the great toe, the phalanges trench, even though the 4 toes are not distinctive. They have the ball, metatarsal base, the interior longitudinal arch, the heel, the exterior longitudinal arch, and a slight bulge in the exterior longitudinal arch. All of these are unique to Homo sapien, to mankind. Now, mankind is also the only individual who is able, by design, to imprint. By imprint, we mean step deliberately within someone else's footprints. At Laetoli, you have 3 sets of prints, one stepping in another and another and another. Thus, you actually have Homo sapien. You have man. You do not have an early form of Homo. In our research at Glenrose, our excavations have proceeded to the point where we have excavated a major dinosaur, 208 dinosaur footprints, and 57 human footprints within those dinosaur footprints. A number of those footprints have the great toe, the 4 other toes, or at least the phalanges trench, the ball, metatarsal arch, medial and longitudinal arches, and the bulge in the lateral arch, the longitudinal arch. There's no question that we have evidence that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously. Leading evolutionary scholars Mildy and Schaefersman admitted that if man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously, that totally destroys the concept of evolution. And I certainly agree with that part of their postulate. So we've come to the conclusion of this discussion, introducing man. It is not the purpose of this series of lectures to go at length into the hominids and the supposed fossils, but evidence currently indicates that man, dinosaur, and all of man's supposed predecessors lived parallel, lived simultaneously. Therefore, there is no precursor leading one vector to another, as Stephen Jay Gould indicated. It looks like creation matches all of the criteria, not only as a bona fide scientific explanation for life origins, but as a superior, the superior explanation for life origins. In our next session, don't miss our consideration of the uniqueness of man.
Our next exciting venture leads us into the wonders of the creation. Around us resides the beauty of God's handiwork.